I want to start with one that I find really one of the most inspirational families from the past to come out of Coshocton County, and it begins with a very strong-willed woman. Frances Blaine Elliott, or Fanny as she was known. She was widowed at the age of 45 while the family was still over in Ireland. Her husband John died and is buried there. He died in 1809 and in Donegal, Ireland. He and Fanny had 15 children. 2 of them died, so 13 of them survived. And in July of 1816, now this would just be 5 years after Coshocton County was formed, Fanny Elliott brought her 9 youngest kids over to America by herself. They landed in Baltimore. They had been out on the ocean for 12 weeks. The ship was actually supposed to be going to New York, but the storms were such that it got off course and they landed in Baltimore instead. It was such a treacherous trip that they actually slept on the decks because they didn't want to be in the bed and be rolling out because of the storm tossing them about so. When they got to Baltimore, Fanny got a wagon and a 4-horse team, and they walked. The kids were in the wagon, and she walked across the Allegheny Mountains to get to what we would call Coshocton County today. Settled in the area of Doughty Creek, which is up by the Holmes-Coshocton County line in the Clark area. That's where the family stems from. She was the daughter of a sea captain, described as strong of arm, daring in spirit, and very fervent in prayer. And as I continue to tell a little bit of the story of the family, you'll pick up on that. But to think that, for me, that this family came from a family that basically was a matriarchal family because the father had died, I thought was really interesting. Among those children that she brought with her to America was Charles, who was the oldest. He was 24 at the time, and Jane, who was 13. So I just want to touch briefly on them, if you can kind of follow the family tree with me here for a little bit. Charles had been licensed over in Ireland as a preacher with the Irish Wesleyan Society. When he came to America then, he joined the Methodist movement here in the United States. In 1841, he saw a need for a Methodist college here in Ohio. And he was so brought with this idea that he wrote an editorial about it. And so the Methodist Church charged him and 2 other gentlemen to search out for a place for a Methodist university. They investigated a hotel resort that was called the Mansion House. That was the name of the facility. And it was a resort area that folks would go to kind of cleanse themselves and feel good, just what we would think of today. And a proposal was offered, and it was accepted. Anyone want to guess what university that might be? She got it. Ohio Wesleyan University was founded by Charles Elliott. Mansion House was renamed Elliott Hall for him, and it's part of the historic district there at Ohio Wesleyan that's on the National Register of Historic Places right now still. He later went on to become president of Iowa Wesleyan College or University as well. A brother Samuel, he was an associate judge here in Ohio, and the 2 of them, they provided scholarships to many of the young students at Ohio Wesleyan. Up in Mill Creek Township, there was a chapel called Elliott's Chapel. That was named after that family. It was built on land given by a brother George. There was another brother John. He was a carpenter, and he was the only Presbyterian in the whole family of Methodists. But he built several of the first Presbyterian and Methodist churches here in Coshocton County, including the belfry on one of the original courthouses. This would be the 1824 courthouse he built was under his supervision. Then there was Fanny's daughter, Jane. I want to touch on her. She was 13 at the time that the family came over. She married a Daniel Boyd from Keene Township. And they gave 2 acres of land for the Keene Church, the Methodist Church in Keene, which if you think of the present Methodist Church, that was really the Presbyterian Church, and I won't go into all that. But they gave the land for the first Methodist Church there in Keene. Their daughter, which would be Fanny Elliott's granddaughter, is the next subject here I want to touch on. She was known to everybody as Maggie. Her given name was Margaret Boyd. And she had this idea that she wanted to go to college. You know, college just shouldn't be for my brothers. And so one day she asked her parents that if she decided to leave, could she go and attend Ohio University, go to the Bobcats. Her wish was granted. And in the college catalog is the name M. Boyd. M because Margaret was the first woman to graduate from Ohio University. And so even at that time, she didn't want to put her full name down for folks to realize that. In 1907, when the university built its first woman's dorm, it was named Boyd Hall in her honor as being the first graduate. And a fellow student wrote of Maggie Boyd, "Her selfless dignity supported her courage, and the door that her gentle spirit opened will never be closed again." The impact of that particular family goes on and on. From the Boyd line, David Ross Boyd, he founded the University of Oklahoma. Brother James Boyd actually wrote the act, the legislation that created Ohio's workers' compensation here in Ohio, which we were the first state across the country to have workers' compensation. So a very, very interesting family, all starting off with Fanny Blaine Elliott. On the talk show this morning, they were talking about presidents that had come through Coshocton and that. And there had been several, and particularly because of the railroad coming through here between Columbus and Pittsburgh. Abraham Lincoln came through on his way to his second inauguration and spoke from the back of the train right down at 5th and Main Streets. Among the most popular eateries or restaurants at that time was one that was run by Aunt Letty Thomas. If you think where the main office supply building, now the Floor Paul's Pets, that's where that was located, so very convenient to the trains as they would come through. And here's her story. She was one of the first African Americans to reside in Coshocton County. She and one other servant had come with Colonel William Simmons when he retired here from Washington, D.C. He was appointed by George Washington to run one of the 5 men to run the first United States Treasury after the Constitution was put into place. He retired up between Warsaw and Nellie, and she was one of the 2 servants. And she remained in his service for several years, but when she got her freedom, then she came to Coshocton and started to operate this restaurant. And her reputation preceded her. I mean, folks that were on the train, they knew where they were going to stop to eat when they were en route. She was known for her Virginian-style cooking, and at that time, William Hunt and his history from back in the 1850s, she was the only colored person, he writes, in Coshocton at that time. She later moved to Oberlin and then back to Washington, D.C., where she boarded students for Howard University. And her one son actually graduated from there and became a Washington, D.C. attorney. When I mentioned about the trains coming through and Abraham Lincoln, he didn't go in the eating establishment, but it was right outside her restaurant that he delivered a speech from the back of the train when he came through for his inauguration.